In order for us to get our work to look like our finished product, what we're going to need are a few more things in the head section. And what we're going to be addressing is the CSS style sheet that is going to be specifically oriented towards our work, as well as referencing the jQuery tools files that we're going to be needing. So in the finished product, I'm just going to copy this information first and foremost, and I'm going to paste it in here. Now you could do the same, or you could just take a second and, if you wish, to type it out yourself. You can see here that there is a link specifically to the CSS folder. Now everything's in place for you already, so that's why this should be easy to work. And as you'll see, it's referencing slideshow.css. We will look at slideshow.css a little bit later. And the other thing that's here is this script tag. And what is the script tag referencing? Well, it's asking us to go to jQuerytools.org, and we're looking at jQuery.tools.min.js. So where did we get that information from? Well, if you return to your browser and you remember that we were at jQuery Tools website, and if you go to the download section, well, here it indicates to you that all you need to do is to copy this information for a real quick start, and that's what we're using, and you're off on your way. And that's all you have to do. And with that, you will have access to a jQuery Tools UI library that will allow you to jQuery and all of its amazing things. So you don't have to have one for jQuery Tools and a separate one for jQuery. This is all taken care of. So that's excellent. So even if you had something outside of jQuery Tools that you wanted to use, and you found something on jQuery, if you remember, either here in the project types or in the jQuery UI, right? So all of that information is taken care of here. But it also allows you to the jQuery Tools UI library with tabs, tooltip, scrollable, overlay. And we're just looking at tabs for the moment, and we're doing a variation of what we see here, where we don't necessarily have to click on these tabs up here, but if you wanted to, that's a pretty easy one to get started with, and all of the information's there. But if you remember, we're looking at the slideshow plugin for tabs, this one right here. And we've taken away some stuff, but most of what we see there is what we want. Also notice that within this information there actually happens to be some written text, so we could have not only images, as I do in my example, but you could also have a tab of information. And as you can see here, whatever's in this div, we had an image, but you can have anything or multiple things. So all of that is what we're going to be addressing. But I do want you to be aware that, you know, there's very many other elements that we can work with here from our home section. If you remember, there was also overlays, and overlays have some pretty nice examples. Even just the simple apple example is a nice one too, which will open up an image and close it when we need it to be closed. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later as well. But in the meantime, what I wanted us to be aware of is this, and as you can see, tabs, tooltip, scrollable is also accessible, as well as overlay. But we'll do things that sort of emulate scrollable within the tabs, as you'll see in just a second. But we need a few things first. So what I'm doing is just copying this information here, pasting it into our head section. If you wanted to do something a little bit more sophisticated, well, you could always download the source code. And in that case, you'd create a folder for yourself next to your CSS folder, and from there you would be making your reference locally instead of through the online method here. So I'm returning to my HTML, and as you can see, that's the important information we need to access the jQuery tools. Now let's just write that jQuery tools code. Now, how do we do that? And especially if those of you are new to this kind of work, you may be intimidated by this, but fear not. There's really no reason to be intimidated, because working with jQuery, whether it's tools or the UI, is really quite simple if you just take a look at a few important steps. So the first thing that I'm going to be implementing in this particular set of code right here is a little bit of information. Actually, let's just copy some information here. And actually, that should be simple comment. And this simple comment here, I'm just going to say enable the jQuery. So in order to enable the jQuery, what we're going to be doing is to be referencing a script. There's my script tag. Now you could say language, and the language we're using is JavaScript. I'll close that just before we do anything else. All right, now that that's done, within that little script area here, we're going to implement a couple of lines of code. So let's do this. First thing we're going to do is to declare our function. Now, usually when you're working with jQuery, you can also take note of document.ready, which basically prepares the file for the use of the jQuery. But here, I'm just going to start by putting in the $, and we're going to put in the function. Now that that's in here, I'm also going to start off with some curly brackets. And let's now put in our first reference inside this function. So I have my $, again. Actually, we're going to keep it down here. So there's my $, and what we're going to be doing in here is to declare scroll tabs. And as you'll see, the scroll tabs class, you notice the dot that's before it. All right, now part of the jQuery tools UI is tabs, so we're referencing tabs, and this would not work unless we had jQuery tools available, and we do. And what's going to be part of the tabs? We're going to declare the class called images. If you remember, that's what we had called it earlier. And within the divs, so within images, there are these divs. All right. So at that point, I'm going to also have another curly bracket in place. And we're going to now declare that we will say enable the crossfade. All right. So in order to do this, it's really quite simple. All you got to do is to declare effect. And as you'll see, I'll be showing you single quotation marks here actually would be best. So that's the effect that we're going to be using, but as you'll notice, there's a couple of other ones that I'll show you as well. And we're also going to have something called fade out. Remember your camel case speed. And we'll set that to slow. And we'll also set rotate to true. And rotate being true, maybe we should put a little note here. We'll say start from the beginning after the last tab. So that'll ensure that we are able to just continue things rotating, and that's pretty much what I want to see happening in there. It's, you know, It's just going to make things a lot easier, and we won't have to have like a back and forward button or something along those lines. And remember, this is for the scroll tabs, and the scroll tabs are those little elements that we're going to be using a little bit later on. However, we're still not finished with what we're doing. So before we do anything else, I also now want to be creating another comment here, and we'll say we want to be using the slideshow plugin, right? So that slideshow plugin is just going to be easily recognized on its own. So since it accepts its own configuration, let's just write a little note here that says use the slideshow plugin. It accepts its own configuration. All right, now to finish this off then, we will need to close the initial brackets that we had here. So I'm going to do that right here. And we're also going to close this first little bracket, and we'll have a right bracket for it. There you go. So that's closed off the scroll tabs information inside this function. And what we want to do is to use the slideshow plugin to do this, right? So we don't have to write a whole bunch of code. The slideshow plugin already does this for us. That's the beauty of working with jQuery and jQuery tools in this case. So I'll just say .slideshow. And we will do this, come in here, and we'll do the same thing to close this up, ending that line. And this all goes within your script tag, just like that. So I'm going to save this, and let's preview it in the browser and see what's happening here. Well, it doesn't seem to be doing much of anything just yet. So let's go back to our code. And oh yeah, I can see exactly what it is. Instead of scroll tabs, it should actually say slide tabs. Sorry about that, my mistake. So once we've got slide tabs being referenced, and slide tabs, as you can see, it's the actual class. So I mean, it could have said scroll tabs, but here I'm using the class called slide tabs, and that's what we're referencing here. It's the tabs portion of the UI interface from jQuery tools that we're referencing as well, and we're doing this for the images class and every div inside the images class. All right, so now that I save this and we preview it in our browser, there you go. Aha, now you can see it working. And as you can see, I've also got the little slide tabs, not the scroll tabs, but the slide tabs sliding their elements along through here. Now, there's still quite a bit of information that I want to get across to you, so come back in the next one and we'll look at some variations to what we can do with this particular work.